This idea of act as if you have the abundance that you want, because from a vibrational perspective, we will attract what we are a match for. But what I misunderstood, and what I think a lot of people misunderstand, is
Kate Northrup, renowned entrepreneur, best-selling author, and speaker.
Men and women are really socialized so differently around money.
Is there a common theme though?
At the core, one of the main things that drives our feelings about money and therefore our behavior around money is...
She teaches ambitious people how to create more abundance without burning themselves out.
How does money play a role in relationships?
Oh, this one's so good. Couples fight a lot about money. Money is the usual number one cause of divorce. And there's so much shame and secrecy because it's a taboo topic. And so I love to encourage people to...
What would be the one belief if you were to install in all humanity?
There's more than enough to go around. And also...
One of the things that piqued my curiosity is that you clearly identify that there is different things and different energies at work when we talk about men and women.
Yes.
And do you think that's true for also our money stories or how we operate around money?
So there's a couple of layers going on. Number one, obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, but every human has different energies running through our bodies. And some of that energy is more masculine, some of it's more feminine. And no matter what the gender presentation of a human, they're going to have that masculine, feminine dynamic happening inside of them. So each of us can experience this just purely within our own bodies without even ever interacting with another human being. That being said, in terms of the money conversation, men and women are really socialized so differently around money. At least in the United States, which is which is where I grew up and what I know. For men, there's far more of a focus on being the provider. You're supposed to have this figured out. You're supposed to just status and your value is how much money you make. And then for women, we are, it was only the year 1975 in the United States that women got the right to take out a loan in their own name without a male cosigner. So in 1975 was 2 seconds ago. If we think about historical time, I mean, it was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Just slightly.
Not even.
Not even.
Yeah.
And so for women socialized in the United States, we have had a very short period of time where we've had access to financial power, and there's still some catching up to do. And so I do think that men and women inherently have different money stories. Part of it is just who they are inherently, but a lot of it is society and the different stories we are told around how we are supposed to be with money. And then, of course, everyone's so individual. I was raised by a mom who had a huge career and was very out there in the world making money. So my money stories are really different than my girlfriends whose moms were stay-at-home moms, where their dads were the ones focused on being the breadwinner. So there's all sorts of intricacies there that show up that are pretty individual.
And what do you think? Is there a common theme though? Not for men, women, just generally as human beings, where you go, hey, there are 3 or 4 kind of, you can call them scripts, you can tell them stories, you can call them patterns that you've found more obvious that we can address today?
So I don't have specific archetypes that I create, but there are some common themes. And the biggest one being scarcity. So I would say it is a common human theme that we are programmed that there's not enough. And so therefore it's hard to come by, or, you have to work hard for it. You have to sacrifice for it. Once you get it, you got to hold on to it. So scarcity comes up as a theme for a lot of people, which is one. Then another one that's really interesting that kind of is a corollary to that, I find it more in the spiritual personal development world. And this is more the money story that I had, which is, well, there's always more where that came from, which is great. It's more supportive than there's not enough. However, people who are operating under, well, there's always more where that came from. Again, true. It's totally true.
Yeah.
However, that can lead to not actually taking really good care of what you already have, because it's I'll just make more later. And so that also isn't actually stewarding our money in as conscious of a way if we're leading with, there's always more where that came from because there's kind of like a detachment.
Yeah.
So I would say scarcity and then almost like abundance via bypass. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And those are two really common ones that I see. And then another one being my worth is how much I make. It's a big one. And then another one is if I can just make a certain amount of money, everything will be better. Everything will be fixed, which is true if our basic needs are not met, obviously.
Yeah.
But we are so conditioned to think that after we have $100K in the bank, after we have a 10K month, a 20K month, a 30K month, whatever it is, especially in the coaching world, there can be such a focus on like, it's going to, and then we're stuck in this. When I get X, I will finally be able to X. You know, when I have an income of $200,000 a year, I will finally be able to relax and have peace of mind. And then we get to that 200K and we don't have the inner capacity to actually feel the way we want to feel. So we just move the carrot and people end up in that chase.
Yeah.
They're
Constantly.
Yeah.
And I still agree with that because I found myself in that chase. And I only very recently recognized or realized that when I will have X, whatever the X is, has been moving forever. And I found a reason to move the needle too, until I realized that created this other kind of scarcity, if you may, where you can give me as much, I was feeling always scarce. It didn't matter how much I had in the bank account. It didn't matter what I had saved up. It didn't matter how much assets I had, because I'm actually really practically really sound with money. But it was never taking away that feeling of a little bit more, and then it'll be okay. You know, a little bit more, and then it'll be okay. Until I got to this place, at least for me, intellectually and spiritually, actually more so than anything else, where it was a little bit of a bypass, I would say. Now that you say it, it's more present to me. It's like where I said, but it's okay. I mean, I can always make more if it does come to that problem, you know? Like there's a sense of, I think the association I had was, I will feel safe when, instead of thinking about the safety is not in a number, safety in yourself. And if you can feel safe now, it actually helps you get to whatever number you need to get to because you're safe anyways.
Exactly. And so what you're speaking to is something that I dive into big time. And that is that at the core, one of the main things that drives our feelings about money and therefore our behavior around money is our nervous system. And our nervous system is very intricately connected to our sense of safety because our nervous system is wired for survival. And so it's very triggered around something like money because money is associated with our sense of safety and security in the world. And so the thing is that we'll have this, you articulated it so perfectly, I will feel safe when, but then it's like you get to that place and then it's like, let me just move that. I still don't feel safe. Oh, it must be that I need another $50,000. Oh, still don't feel, oh, it must be that. And like, as you said, you never get there, right? You never get there because we are never going to feel safe with a certain amount of money if we don't know how to feel safe now. And as you just said, that actually feeling safe is a prerequisite to feeling abundant.
Mm-hmm.
If we do not feel safe first, we cannot actually access a feeling of true abundance, which can be connected to money, but can be connected to a lot of other things. And I have a theory, which is that when we feel safe within, when we feel whole and complete, and the truth that in this moment, all of our needs are actually met. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you're fine.
Like, if you have the time,
all is well right now. All is well. You are provided for. You know, there's no imminent emergency if you are listening to this. And so when we're in that place and can actually feel the truth of that and not have our survival mechanisms turning us into like triggering a sympathetic nervous system response, which is fight, flight, freeze, flop, that will be triggered by like, a letter from the IRS. You can't even imagine the number of people in my programs who they just see the logo of the IRS and their body is in a complete stress response from seeing a logo, which is completely illogical. Yeah. Now, what's happening is that they're in a trauma response, they're in a stress response. It's completely illogical. And the body creates all of these reactions that prevent us from actually feeling the truth of our abundance. But when we learn how to access safety, not from the external reality, not from the amount of money in our bank account, not from how many coaching clients we have, not from whatever, we actually can enter a place of a parasympathetic nervous system response, and we become more resonant. We have greater capacity. And I think because of the way frequency works and because of the way our bodies are literally made up of energy, we're like 99% space and like less than 1% matter. And that space is just atoms moving around, and it is energy. So when we can find that place of safety inside, I believe we become more magnetic to abundance. And we know this in sales, if you're a coach, you're doing discovery calls and you are feeling whole and complete, no desperation. You just know the quality of your work. You are going to be radiating confidence. That person on the other side of that Zoom is going to be like, I'm signing up with this person because that is magnetic AF. Yeah. And that's what we can get to, where we're finding that internal safety. And then it does make it way easier to make money, but we can't wait for the money to come before we learn to feel safe.
Yeah, so true. And it's also...
Well, we can, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Or even if you make it, it's just, you don't get out of the zone of the more, and you just have the stress response all the time. So yes, you might make money, but what's the cost of it?
What is the cost of it? And I'm sure you know, and so do I, plenty of people who have tons of money, more than they could ever need, more than they could ever use. They do not feel safe. They do not feel abundant. They do not feel like it's enough. And what's the point? That's like a lot of wasted resources.
Yeah. Yeah, and they never
for somebody to not actually enjoy their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I love your book, and we'll talk about the book, but generally how you also talk about spend where you need to spend. I've seen people with a lot of money, and I mean, maybe it's just because I'm Indian. And that's how my parents gave me. Our culture is, if we are going to go out for dinner, I'm paying. It doesn't matter. At least I'm going to fight for it, right? It's just, that's just how it is. And so it's like, it's one of those things that if I'm walking in, we are going to have dinner, before I even come sit at the table, my card's already with the host because the bill's not even going to come, right? But I've seen really very abundant individuals be like, all right, let's split it. What did you eat? What did I eat? I was like, I don't understand that. I understand from a very Western perspective, but I almost feel like if we had the time, energy, and willingness to sit down together for an hour together, wouldn't you want to be like, hey, that's okay. Anybody can cover it, So we don't have to figure out dollar to dollar, just throw the cards in, even if you want to split.
Exactly. And that comes from a core feeling of scarcity. Yeah. Right? If it's like, oh, you had
line item, but
you had the green salad, I had the chickpea, whatever. It's like, oh my gosh, it comes out. I always say it just comes out in the wash. Yeah. On the other hand, though, I will say back to, we have a spectrum of everything, right? We can have a spectrum of penny pinching. No matter how much money there is, it's always there's not enough, and I have to protect mine, and and then we can also, on the other end, though, back to that bypassing, have this thing of oh, we're just gonna split it. I'm not even gonna look at the bill. I'm not gonna pay any attention. And that is also a way of avoiding. That can be a real way of avoiding being in relationship with our money. That also actually can be a dysregulated, disassociated relationship with money when we're not paying attention to what's going out the door or what's coming in. And I see that in the spiritual abundance world where folks are like, oh, I don't need to pay attention to my money because the universe is an abundant place and I'm always cared for. And it's like, yeah, but you wouldn't. If you want your money to support you, If you had a friendship where you wanted it to be a supportive friendship, you wouldn't be like, oh, I never need to text my friend back. I don't ever need to look them in the eye. I don't ever need to pay attention to them. And so I'll see that as well. I go both ways.
Oh yeah, maybe it's a fear. I don't know. Well, maybe it's an interesting thing to think about, because I've met such people too, and unfortunately they tend to have really large credit card debts because they just never looked at it, and then they go, oh crap, yeah, I have to pay like
really add up
credit cards. So like, how did you get there? Like, it's not your college thing that you're paying. It's like literally I've accumulated $50,000 on travel bills, and I'm like, that's a little insane to have that. And that you cannot pay. I mean, not only accumulated, you cannot pay it because you don't have the money now. What could be possibly happening there? Why does someone develop such a bypass?
I know it well because that's what I used to be.
Yeah.
So that was my story. I started reading like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and all these personal finance books, but also spiritual laws of prosperity books very early, like when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And I really particularly loved the more spiritual ones, like Catherine Ponder, The Divine Laws of Prosperity, Think and Grow Rich. You know, this idea of act as if you have the abundance that you want, because from a vibrational perspective, you know, we will attract what we are a match for. But what I misunderstood, and what I think a lot of people misunderstand, is act as if does not mean spend as if. And those are two different things.
Yeah.
There's an energetic beingness of being abundant where we can also say, you know what? I'm going to eat dinner at home 6 nights a week instead of eat out 6 nights a week, because I can create an abundant experience of stewarding the money I have and paying loving attention to it, not from a place of lack or deprivation, but from a place of these are my resources and I'm going to care for them, which is actually a really abundant thing to do. So what I did is totally the opposite. I paid no attention. I was a total financial avoider, fully in spiritual bypass around it, because there was a big secondary gain. And I find this for a lot of folks, the secondary gain, which is, you know, when we're, for those who aren't familiar with that term, when we're engaging in a behavior that we know is technically not good for us, which for me, it was overspending and not being aware of my finances and just essentially being immature. Mm-hmm. So really not other good way to say it. I was engaging that behavior. There was a part of me that knew it wasn't good for me. I had sort of tried to stop, but I wasn't able to change the habit. And I would like stop using my credit cards, and then I would go buy something again, or I was like in this push pull with it. So the secondary gain I got from that was I didn't have to be an adult. And so the secondary gain is the thing that we get to avoid doing or not have to deal with by engaging in this other non-supportive behavior. So my financial avoidance allowed me to remain on some level a little girl around my money. Mm-hmm. And I finally realized, and one of my friends and mentors, Barbara Hewson, said that for women specifically, and it may be true for men too, I don't know, but she said our ambivalent relationship with money is connected to our ambivalent relationship with our power. Mm. And for me, I knew that my financial chaos and avoidance and that debt and not knowing how much it was really and moving it around from card to card so I could kind of do this shell game was a way I was playing small. Like I knew what was in me. I knew I had a big energy to bring to the world, and it scared me. Mm. And so my way of kind of like making sure that I wouldn't get too big or be too powerful or threaten anyone or freak anyone out, right, was to be in financial chaos. Mm. And it really was effective. It's an effective strategy.
Because you didn't have a chance to compound wealth at all.
You don't have a chance to compound wealth. And then also there's an energetic cost. The avoidance. We think that looking at the truth of our money is going to cost us something, like that knowing the truth is going to be painful. But actually, once I finally sat down and just looked at the numbers and got super clear, It actually, the truth in my situation was worse than I thought it was. Although I will say in my programs, for a lot of people, the truth is actually better than they thought. So I was worst case scenario. It was worse than I thought. However, I felt amazing knowing the avoidance was such a huge energy leak. I didn't realize that it was like having a static radio station going at all times, and how much of my focus, how much of my energetic resources that was taking up. Just like the kind of hazy, nebulous feeling of like there's a problem over here, but I'm not dealing with it. That'll suck you dry energetically. So once I started handling it and I knew the truth and I started making a plan to get my debt paid off, making a plan to increase my income, I got myself organized. I took off like a rocket ship because I had reclaimed that energy that I was letting be sucked out because I was scared of being as powerful as I knew I could be.
How did you get your head around to it, though? Because I would find, or at least from my experience of speaking with people, I find that being a big challenge for individuals who are in that energy for whatever reason. It could be because of, avoidance, because you're trying to be not so big. It could be because you just had to grow up too early, and so you now want to be a kid, whatever it might be the reason. But I find it really hard for them to like sit down and say, let's get my shit together.
Yeah.
How did you get there? Maybe it'll help.
Yeah, I needed help. I did. And so that's what I recommend is to find a safe person. It could be a friend who is going to love you unconditionally and not judge you. It could be, for me, I used money I didn't have to hire somebody. It wasn't super expensive, but I did hire a financial planner for a few sessions to just be on the phone with me. It was back in the day when I had a landline. So she was on the phone with me with my cordless phone on speaker. I was on the floor with all my paperwork. And for me, I needed to invest just a little bit of money to hold my toes to the fire to get it together. Because I wasn't going to ghost this woman, I respected her. I paid money. Yeah. So I had to make an appointment with another person to hold myself accountable. Yeah. And that's what I recommend is a safe person who you don't have to necessarily pay, but somebody to be with you. Because the other thing that we know is that it is so much easier to take action that is uncomfortable when we're able to co-regulate with a safe person. And so this safe person for me, her name was Janice. And Janice was not judging me. Janice was like a tough love person, but a loving person. And I have been this person with friends and in my programs to just hold that thermostat of like, you are safe. I believe in you. Money is not that hard. Really, if you can do fourth grade math, you can totally rock it being good at money. You really can. And which they make it sound complicated to keep people out of wealth, but it's really not that hard. And to really we all need that person because our bodies do not believe the lie of separation. So the lie of separation is you and I are totally separate and, there's no connection and we're just these little silos. The lie of separation is very connected to the lie of scarcity. They're like sisters. And the lie of scarcity says, of course, there's not enough to go around. Because of our mirror neurons and because of the brilliant way our nervous systems work, if you are looking at me and you are believing in me and you are a safe, loving person and you are holding the thermostat in your body of like, I believe in you, you're infinitely powerful, you can do this. There is something that happens in my body where that feels possible in a way it is not if I'm sitting in a room by myself or if I'm, not on the phone with you. I mean, I'm describing coaching, right?
Yeah.
This is why
this
industry works, but it's not. I think what's really important to know, or what I've discovered, is that it certainly is belief. It happens on a mental level, but it actually is happening on a physiological level. Like our bodies have access to energetic resources and an availability to re-imprint our neural pathways, which run not only in our mind, but all through our bodies in a powerful way when we're in safe community. So that's where I really recommend starting, is finding safe community to do this work together, which is exactly what I did back in the day.
I can see that. And like you said, it's so powerful to have just somebody to trust you for a hot minute so you can also trust yourself a little bit more. Like you get back into that, okay, no, I can do this. It's not, especially when somebody, and that's why I love coaching. I love your work as well, because you simplify it so much for a person that you go, oh yeah, this is fourth grade math. Because a lot of people I meet, they go, it's so hard. And I was like, it's not. If you did addition to subtraction, percentages, that's pretty much, it's not algebra. That's what people think it is.
It's not algebra.
No.
No, I even failed fractions. Like, I can't really even do fractions. My second grader has now exceeded my math ability.
Yeah.
I can't help her with her math homework anymore, but I'm really good at money. So if I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, but most people think it's so complicated because, like you said, like everybody makes the terms so complicated that everybody feels like, oh my God, it must be so hard. But it is not hard. It's actually
It is not
easy.
hard. And there are people who have benefited for hundreds and hundreds of years from other people thinking it's hard.
Yeah.
Right? And specifically for women, there has been a very purposeful campaign for thousands of years to keep women away from access to power, which includes away from access to financial resources. I mean, that's been on purpose. And so I also recommend that people look at, if they say like, oh, I'm not good with money, or this is hard, or whatever, I always recommend people ask themselves, who benefits from me believing that?
Yeah.
Because it helps us like snap ourselves out of the slumber.
Yeah.
And for those of us who are a little bit rebellious by nature, it can light a fire under your ass and be like, okay, no more. I'm doing this.
How does money play a role in relationships? Yeah.
Oh, this one's so good. I mean, my husband and I, we have been on a journey in terms of money. So money, sex, and power are all connected in the second chakra of the body. And this is the area of the body that is our reproductive organs, our low back. It is the energy center connected. And so in relationships, in romantic relationships, money is going to be all intertwined in the sexual energy, and it is fascinating. I mean, if you look at like kind of like that classic, dating scenario with like the wealthy guy and then the beautiful woman, like, right? Like it's right there. It's money, sex, and power. There it is. And we utilize these different energies unconsciously. We learn through modeling. We learn through the media. We learn that we have these different currencies. And particularly as women, some of us, not myself, but other women I know, were raised more to utilize their sexual energy currency. Mm-hmm. And men are more likely to use their financial currency energy as a way of attraction, as a way of utilizing their power in the world. So that's just kind of interesting to roll around in your mind and be like, oh, wow, how am I playing with those energies in my own life? And I'm not talking about power over, I'm talking about power into, which is sort of like the darker side of power, but like the power to use your will in the world and create what you want to create. That's all I'm talking about in terms of power. So when it comes to relationships, some of the most common things I see are a lot of secrecy, avoidance, hierarchy created around whose job pays more, or an idea of like whose job is more important, whose income is more valued. So it's very common in the work that I do to see that couples fight a lot about money. Money is the usual number one cause of divorce, money issues. And there's so much shame and secrecy because it's a taboo topic. So folks are all over the place, just getting married, having no idea what's actually happening behind the scenes with their partner's finances. And then all of a sudden, because of the marriage contract, their partner's finances are now their finances. Yeah. And so I love to encourage people to learn each other's money stories, not just the math, but actually like what's underneath the surface. What did you learn about money growing up? What do you believe around money? What are some of your habits? What do you think is possible for you? What are your desires? What are your ambitions? What kind of investor are you? Are you an investor at all? What's your debt history? Like, I think those kind of conversations to have earlier rather than later, maybe not on the first date, but like really getting into it, it's really important. And it's not to say that you're going to not be with someone because maybe they have a financial past that you wouldn't have chosen, but the level of connection and intimacy that can be created when we're being honest and like getting financially naked is so beautiful, and people avoid it for decades. And then they do that work in our programs, and they're like, oh my God, I'm having financial conversations with my spouse for the first time in decades. We're not fighting. We're having the greatest time. Now we're on the same page. And that life force energy, that money, sex, and power energy then can come on board and fuel the financial desires and the dreams of the marriage or of the partnership in this beautiful way that it can't if there's avoidance, secrecy, shame, all of that. That's like a huge energetic block that will shut down your second chakra energy.
Yeah, so true. What I found really useful in our conversations and conversations that we suggest to our clients to have is to ask a fundamental question to get the conversation started as to what do you even believe is the role of money in our lives.
Love that.
Like what is money's role? And what we found is a lot of people never answer that question to start with. They just think you just should have money. But
well,
like
it's so unconscious.
Yeah, it's like what is it doing for you? Fine, you have money. Now what? Like what is the role? What would you do if you had all the money in the world? Or whatever money you think is all the money in the world, because that's also so arbitrary. And as you ask these questions, you recognize that the definition of a lot of money is different for everyone. The role of money is so different. You could love each other and have completely different roles of money.
Yes.
And what's really the purpose of making more if you have to make more? What is the vision of life, or how do we define a good life? What is a good life? Is just more money, or does it actually have elements beyond that? And if it has elements beyond that, is the elements more important, or is money more important? And it kind of sets a person up to say, okay, if I don't have which I think is a more difficult conversation, which is talk about let's say your impending debt that you have, or debt that you've just accumulated because let's say you were unconscious about it. You were in your 20s, you were just like whatever. And you realize, crap, I have too much debt now. It's easier to then say, you know what, I've been this until now because of my relationship with money. And now I like to change that because now I want to go here. Now you can come up with a plan together, which is kind of what you said when you had accumulated debt. One of the biggest things that, from what I understood you said, was to sit down and say, let's make a plan to get out of this. And then you were able to. The challenge that most people have is they never make that plan because it's so scary.
It's so scary. And there's so much shame. And the shame, like actually facing it, the shame feels so bad that because shame says, I am fundamentally bad, right? Not I've done something bad, but like I am bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so we avoid it because of that feeling of shame. But actually what we know, of course, from Brene Brown's work is that shame cannot exist in the light. And that's why having a safe person, whether it's your partner, whether it's, a professional that you hire, whether it's a community, whatever, that shame dissolves, which is powerful because without the shame, then you're just like, oh, well, now it's just kind of practical.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm just going to make a plan. And so, but I love those questions. And I'm going to be asking Mike on the way to date night tomorrow night, what do you believe the role of money is in our lives?
Yeah.
It's a good one.
It's a fun question.
Yeah, it's great.
Fun question. It definitely also shared like our fundamental values around money. It's like, okay, why? What is it that we actually see? And we found out from me and Neeta both that the role of money we had for both of it. Now it's much more closer because once you talk about it enough, you kind of go, okay, there's like a bridge. We kind of have the same understanding. It's just we position it differently. But when we started, we were like two other ends of what the role of money was in our life. Mine was absolute safety. It was just like the money's job is only to make me feel safe. And that's the only purpose of it, which meant, of course, I saved a lot and I spent very little because, I mean, if that's your story, that's what you would do. Whereas Neeta's definition of what was the role of money in her life was to live life.
Yes.
So she was like,
adventure,
I don't care how much my savings that I want to go for this adventure, this experiences. Not being irresponsible about it, but still what's the point of keeping it in the bank account? So, of course, two completely different points.
Which is very common in relationships that will have a spender and a saver attract.
Yeah. So eventually now it's more, we now have she's moved towards this side, I moved towards this side a little bit, and now we have a more balanced approach that makes sense, and we have common agreements.
Common agreements. I'm so glad you said that. That's one of the things I really recommend. Now, listen, people are always like, how exactly should I set it up with my spouse? And I'm like, I am not here to prescribe, but what I am going to tell you is you need to have a system and you need to have clear agreements. No agreements, vagueness will repel money so fast.
Yeah.
So we need to have clear agreements with ourselves. We need to have clear agreements with our partner, whether everything is shared financially, whether you keep everything separate, whether it's some combination. The clarity is what actually magnetizes money to us. Money loves clarity.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Money flows to clarity and it compounds so fast once you are clear, because it also, clarity really creates quality of life overall in anywhere where you get clarity. If you get clarity about your relationship gets better too. Like, what's the role of the relationship? And you would find that there is a very clear understanding you have, which may not be in agreement with your partners. And suddenly, if you find that clarity between you, relationship gets better. Business gets better if you're clear.
Yeah.
So anything that promotes clarity, I think, is super helpful. Is there a common pattern that you find in relationships beyond, of course, not even having the conversation?
Yeah,
Let's say they've had the conversation. Let's say they've had a conversation. What are some of the things that you find are the greatest charges in relationship, let's say, if I may call them crimes that are committed in the world of finance, or beliefs around finance and relationship?
So one thing I find is incredibly common is that, and most of my community is women. And so what I find, and so I'm not saying this is like good global data, okay? This is anecdotal from my community. But a very high percentage of women come into this kind of work and they're doing that soul searching and they're doing that nervous system healing work and they're really getting in touch with their emotional landscape and digging it, and then and learning about the energetic aspects and the frequency aspects of abundance. And then they bring it to their spouse or their partner. And if it is a heterosexual couple, he's just like, basically like, that is BS. There's just either the money is there or it's not, and like not on board with anything beyond a spreadsheet. So I see that a lot. And you could speak to this better than I can, but that was my parents' marriage, which did not last. And so they kind of like met in the middle somewhere, sort of, but that's challenging. So that's one. And then the other one, and I already said it, is keeping secrets.
Oh, yeah.
Which around anything. But since we're talking about money right now, having financial secrets, the number of, oh my God, I remember one time I was in my 20s making my own money, and I went shopping. And I was in a store with all these ladies, and they were older than I was. And I was making a big purchase at the time. And they were like making jokes about how they were going to put their purchases on multiple credit cards so their husbands wouldn't know the total, and then hide the purchases under the bed so he wouldn't be aware that they had gone shopping. And the shopkeeper lady was like, oh, do you want to split this over multiple cards so you can whatever? And I was like, no, this is my money. And also, wow, because I didn't know, I was in my 20s. That wasn't a world I was part of. And so that sounds so outdated to me, but the number of people who just aren't being honest, and that can be met with clear financial agreements. So for example, in our marriage, we just have an agreement. If we're going to spend over $1,000, we just have a quick check-in about it. Not, I'm asking permission, but just like, hey, this is our money. I'm going to make this purchase. Here's why it's important to me. Great. Done. Handled. So that there's no like, oh, I did this. Now we're resenting. Because sometimes, Mike wants to buy like, I don't know, some kind of sports equipment that I like really don't care about, but I care about him.
Yeah.
And so great. And I want to go do whatever beauty thing or whatever. He's like, what? Okay, fine. Carry on.
Yeah.
So we don't always have to spend money on the same things or value the same things in those ways. But I do think we need clarity, communication, and clear agreements.
I so agree with you. And I think the last part that you said, which is about, I think why people keep secrecy, is because we are very fearful in relationships. At least that's my understanding of now as I interact beyond my own relationship. And I'm talking to other people. As I coach more, I realize that the men are scared that if divorce happens, it's going to be like this big financial debt. So they just don't tell what they have and they hide that. And women, I'm not saying this is global, of course. I'm saying what I'm observing in my clientele or my friends even sometimes. And the women won't say because they think that the guy is going to comment because they don't understand the purchase, because they don't understand how a woman operates or whatever. They just haven't invested time in, like, for a guy, jewelry is not important most of the time, or maybe they'll make one big watch purchase and that's the purchase that'll last them a lifetime.
One watch for the life.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, like, or 5 watches, but a woman would want a new piece of jewelry every year or every 3 months, and I think it's totally okay till the time it's been done in the right way, right? In the sense where it's financially responsible.
Right.
But they feel, because the frequency is higher, is like, oh, you're spending all the money. And because they get criticized like that, women are like, I'm not going to trust this guy. He's an idiot. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get me. And so over time, the relationship, because the relationship doesn't have trust, it starts to build on secrets. And then, of course, it magnifies everywhere else in life, because it starts with something small, like, I'm not going to tell about my bag, but then who knows where it'll go. And it happens on both sides. And it just energy of secrecy, and it will never really it doesn't really get resolved until somebody starts being honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, just to be clear, I don't think we need to like tell our partner every single little thought in our minds. Like, it's like, but certainly, like, let's not hide like large purchases, and let's talk about those things. And I think actually it's such an opportunity to build connection. Like, I think if we can reframe that, like, this is hard and it's scary and I'm going to be judged and it's going to be a fight, whatever. Actually, what I find, having worked with many, many couples, is it can create this shared connection and common ground and an opportunity to really know your partner better and be like, wow, tell me more about all this sports equipment. You want to know like, what is it that lights you up about that? Or about, I'm not really a jewelry person, but like, let's pretend I was, right? Or just like, what does it about that for you? Because ultimately, money is pretend.
Yeah.
It is a made up system that we just are all playing along with. Like, there's just a very, very few societies that are not participating on the planet. But pretty much, if you're listening to this, you're participating.
Yeah.
And so we have to understand it's a game.
Yeah.
It is pretend. And so money is just a stand-in for what we value.
Yeah.
And if we're using it the way it's designed, we use it to create more of what we value in our lives and in the world. And when we do that, actually, we immediately tap into an experience of abundance that is not available when we're unconsciously spending to like keep up with our neighbors or make our dad proud, or like, that's not our values. Our values are what makes my heart sing, like what really matters to me. So if you can dive into that with your partner, what is important to them, what really matters to them, you can get to know each other better. You can support each other in creating more of that. And it actually magnetizes and magnifies the abundance in the relationship.
Absolutely. And there's just something that's occurring to me. I think as a man, or a masculine energy, if you may, most men, I believe, are good men. Most, right? Like, most human are good humans.
100%.
And I think if we could set it in the right container and have a real conversation, a man would be even more drawn to a woman that honestly can tell them and bring them to that table and have a conversation with them and say, because I know I melt when Nita tells me why something's important to her. I'm like, fuck that. I'll move the world if I can to get you what you want. At least I will try my best.
Right.
And I'm not, because eventually, like you said, I mean, we're not working to just have more numbers in our bank account. That might be our insecurity, but we're working, or we're doing whatever we are doing, not only men, women too, because we want to feel something. There's an experience of life we want that we afford through this transaction of money. And if we don't have the money, we can't have that experience. But if our partner's not having the experience, there's no point having the experience, because what am I going to do there alone? Like, I mean, what am I going to do? Like, it's not fun. I've traveled a lot alone, and it's fun for a minute. But it's way more fun to travel with Nita. It's way more fun to travel with my kids. It's way more fun to travel with my parents and her parents and our friends and all of that. When we go together, that's when it's the most fun. Going alone is fun, yeah, sure, for a couple of trips, but that not all the time. And so why not have that conversation? I think just as a masculine energy, I feel any good man would be very excited to say, hey, listen, I may not agree with you, but I want to move towards it. I want to have these conversations more, because every time you do, I get to understand a little bit more of you.
Yeah. It's beautiful because you are revealing a part of yourself. And when we have done the work on our own side of the street to connect with what matters to us, then we are revealing an authentic part of ourselves, as opposed to what women have been conditioned to do historically, which is be like really manipulative and weird around money and around, this is back to the money, sex, and power, because we didn't historically have access to our own resources. We learned this backwards manipulative, like, I'm going to hide the handbag under the bed, and then I'm going to withhold sex, and then I'm going to like think that him buying me jewelry is going to mean I'm loved. Like it. Ugh. So it's also like this sort of conversation that we're talking about is actually also unraveling thousands of years of patriarchy. Mm-hmm. And so I think that revolution can live within each of our partnerships as well, to just like come together heart to heart and reveal those parts of ourselves that are true.
Yeah.
And a money conversation can lead you there.
Yeah. And women are, there's something that you said previously about your parents, like how your dad was more 3D and your mom was more 5D. And I want to bring the masculine feminine conversation a little bit more closer here. It's not that, and I think most men would say that they are more 3D or tend to be more 3D, and women tend to be more 5D. But as we've evolved as society, we've understood that that's our gap. At least the aware men, at least the people in personal development or who are remotely curious about it. I can't speak for everyone. But we all know that we don't know what we don't know. And in my community, I found that more and more men are like, yeah, I want to know what she knows, because she definitely knows more. That's definitely true. I don't know why, how, it's intuition, it's this or that, whatever it is. This is actually really, really true. So I was abundant before. I was running a company. I was successful. But since Nita has come into my life, so it's been about 7 years now, precisely 7 years, actually, 8 years dating, 7 years married. And ever since she has come, I have probably made, I want to say 20 times more money.
Wow.
Right. And it is not because we do business together. It's because she's in my life. It has a lot to do with the subtleties and the soft energy, if I may call it that a female brings, the right female brings, not all female. And like not all men will experience it either, right? It's got to be the right frequency. But there is tremendous power women hold if they let it. Because they can be that, and it doesn't, and she's also become very much more abundant. So it's not like I would say no role in her abundance. I'm not discounting myself.
Yes, you have created that structure and support, I would imagine, energetically as well.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that dance, it only happens when the frequencies match, when the dance is together. So there is no point resisting the dance. If it doesn't work, you rather not. But if it works, which I hope most of it will, because you chose each other for a reason, there was a message there. And I think at that moment, it will just spiral so much more, is what I feel about it.
Yeah. And I mean, that comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, that we all have these masculine and feminine energies within us, and they do create an alchemy. And they can come together within our own bodies. They can come together within two people. But that alchemical, because we bring different things to the table, and both of those things are required to bring in money.
Yeah.
The structure and the flow. Yeah. And the feminine is the flow, and the masculine is the structure. And sometimes, I know couples where actually more the masculine is the woman and the more the feminine is the man. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But knowing that we actually need both, that inspiration, that magnetism, that like yummy feeling, and then also like the right bank account and a good, and a money management system. They both really matter. And I find that, back to what you asked me at the beginning, what are these kind of different archetypes or different money stories that people are playing out? Not to be overly binary about it, but like, it's basically like, is somebody way too far in the 3D or is somebody way too far in the 5D? And when we can bring them together, it really creates this beautiful dance financially.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Kate, what would be the one belief if you were to install in, let's say, all humanity, if you had a chance, because it would help us all, what would that be?
There is enough and I am enough. So one thing, I mean, I'm a data person. And one thing that I want to really pass along to folks to help us to unravel or dissolve the lie of scarcity is that what we know is that there's actually enough resources on the planet for everyone to live a good life. There actually are. They're being mismanaged. There's hoarding going on. I'm not saying they're well distributed, but they're there. So I think it's helpful to know that. And if anybody wants to read more about that, you can read the book, The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee. Wonderful book. There's also some great data on that from Lynn Twist in The Soul of Money with her book, with her work with Buckminster Fuller and the Hunger Project. So just if you want to follow that rabbit hole, you can. But just really getting that, like, there's enough. And I find I am able to more quickly update my beliefs when I have the data behind it. So I just want to let everyone know, scientifically speaking, that's true. And then also the other piece around there's enough, money is really created. So for example, if I have an old car and it's not running anymore, like it's a vintage old car, it's been sitting late in my grandfather's garage or something, and then I go in there and fix it up as though that's ever going to happen. But let's pretend I know how to do that. Mike might. Okay, so let's pretend Mike knows how to do that, and he's going and he's fixing up the car, and then he's able to sell it for, like, I don't know, maybe it's some fancy classic car. He's able to sell it for like 80 grand or something. I don't know how much cars cost. And that value, the difference between the materials of that old vintage car that wasn't running, it was all rusty, it was like had like mouse living in, in the chassis, whatever, and the $80,000 was created. He literally would have created that money through his ingenuity, through his effort, through his energy, through his, like, it's not like he took that money from anywhere. It wasn't anywhere, and then he created it. So I think I would really like to install the belief that there's more than enough to go around, and also I can create more of it at any time through my resourcefulness, which are my inner resources, and my connections of abundance of community and the availability of literally anything you want to know for free on the internet. So that's one. And then I guess that connects to I am enough, which is no baby is ever born and then held by their parents the first day or whoever their caregivers are. And those parents are thinking, oh, this one, not good enough. They didn't come in right. Like they're lacking in some way. No, every single child, they come out and they are completely worthy, completely whole, completely lovable. We can't stop looking at them. We're obsessed because also that child has not forgotten their worthiness. That happens later. And then as parents, we try to prevent that from happening in our children. But like, that's who we are. We come in with infinite worthiness, infinite enoughness, infinite lovability. And if it was true on the first day of your life, it is still true. And it will be true the minute you die.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Kate. How can the listeners, watchers learn more about you?
Yeah, so you can go to katenorthrup.com or follow me on Instagram at Kate Northrup. And if you've liked this money conversation and you want to dive deeper with it with me, I do have a free money breakthrough guide, and you can just shoot me a DM that only says the word wisdom on Instagram, and I'll send you a free money breakthrough guide.
Thank you so much, Kate. It was fun.
Thank you.